Hi there, this is Jeanette, and today I have a graduation card that I created for my young son who is graduating elementary school. I used Lawn Fawn's stamp set, Your One Smart Cookie, and this was a very fast and easy way to create a card that he ended up absolutely loving. So I'm going to share this with you. To start off with, I did take some Neenah cardstock and Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I just stamped a bunch of the cookies. As you saw on the card, I want to have like piles of cookies. And then one of the cookies is going to be a special little cookie, so I am putting a little pair of glasses and eyes there on the cookie. I'm also going to stamp the graduation cap as well as the little diploma that comes in the set. When you have a bunch of items that are exactly the same and you're going to color them exactly the same, I think there's a tendency to think that you should do them all at once. But with Copic markers, it's much better if the ink is still wet when you're blending. It makes the blend easier. So what I like to do is do just little bunches of them. So I was doing 3 at a time. And this way, the ink is still wet and I can blend out the lines more easily than if I colored, for example, colored everything with a lighter color. By the time I got back to that first cookie, the ink would be dry and it would be harder to blend. So it's actually faster to do it this way. Just do a few at a time. This little cookie on the bottom, I will be adding some glossy accents to the eyeglasses itself, but everything else is colored the exact same way. So you can see that I'm now finished with the cookies, and I'll work on the graduation cap. Even though it's really small, I did end up using 4 marker colors, and that was just so that I got a really nice highlight on the cap itself. And I did work from darkest to lightest, which is not what I usually do, but this was a better way to control exactly where the highlight was going to be, and you can see that there. And I just kept adding color until there were no lines and the blend was perfect. The tassel is just 2 colors of red here. You can see them on the screen. They'll be the same colors that I'll be using to color the ribbon on the diploma. And for the diploma, I just used some very light cool gray colors just to give a little bit of definition. And then those are the same reds that I used on the tassel. So I cut everything out. There is a die set that you can purchase, but I don't have it. So I cut everything out by hand. It wasn't too long. Now I have some Strathmore BRISTOL paper, which is a watercolor paper, and I'm adding some antique linen, basically starting on the edges and working my way into the middle. Then I added some old paper, which is slightly darker. It's not really that much darker. You could probably skip that step if you wanted. And then I have brushed corduroy, which I'm going to sponge on. Now, I had chosen the sponge blender thinking that it was a dark brown that was on the blender, but as you can see, as I'm working on the paper, it must have been black soot. It was something black. So I ended up getting a little bit of black around the edges. So what I did is I took another blender and went over the edges with the brush corduroy, and that sort of made it read more brown rather than having that sort of black color, although the black did end up giving some definition, which was quite nice. So once it's all blended, I'm going to take my distress sprayer and I'm just going to spritz some water over top and then dab it off. I just have an old face cloth here that I'm using. And then I have this die. This is from Pretty Pink Posh. I believe it's called the Storyteller die. You'll see the link to all the products I'm using below this video. I'm just going to line it up and make sure it's really centered. And I'll put a piece of Post-it tape right over top to make sure that it's not going to shift around or move once I run it through my Big Shot. So I'm sandwiching it between the plates, and then I ran it through the Big Shot. Now I have a card base that I created with some brown cardstock, and I'm going to start adhering all the components to the card base. Just sort of checking where I want the sentiment to be. I didn't know if I wanted that longer rectangle window to be on the top or the bottom. I have some foam tape, so I'm just going to run that along each edge of this die cut, and this is going to pop it off the card a little bit. And the foam tape ended up being the exact same width as the die cut, so that was pretty good. I just had to trim a few pieces off where I wasn't so precise putting it on. Then I'll peel all the release paper off, and I will position it on top of my card base. So that's going to be lifted off the card, and the inserts I'm going to adhere into the middle, and they will lay flat and flush against the cardstock, so you get that nice sort of pocket effect. So just be sure that you're adding them in correctly, like exactly where they're supposed to be. Match the sort of depth of color of the ink on each one before you put it in. And then I just added adhesive to each of the little cookies, and I'm going to start putting them into the card. It's a little off screen here, sorry about that. There, I pushed the card up for you. So I just piled them one on top of each other, and then started working on the other side just to get a good look of how it was going to look at the end. I decided that that other cookie should go up here, so I'll pile that on there. And this card really did not take very much time to create. I think the longest part probably was cutting out the different components, and if you wanted to, you could purchase the die set that matches the stamp set, and then you wouldn't have to do that. So I'm using some Zig clear glue now to glue on the graduation cap as well as the diploma. And before I put the diploma on, I will use some glossy accents just to the glasses, and that just gives it a nice sort of glossy effect. I'm going to position the little sentiments in this little opening here. And I used the graduation sentiment that comes in the Elfie Selfie stamp set, which is also by Fawn. It actually ended up being the perfect size and matched the font pretty well to the other set. I'll be stamping that with Memento Tuxedo Black ink just along the bottom. Actually, no, I pulled out my Versamark because I find Versamark sometimes gives a crisper stamp, so I had pulled that out. Actually, I'd forgotten about that. So I stamped the congratulations, and then for the other sentiment I will be using some red ink. I think it was from Stampin' Up, the ink that I used, and I will just stamp them one at a time. I ended up stamping, I think, the bottom one first so that I could line up the top one. So that's it. That's all I did to create this card. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope it inspires you to create a card for your smart cookie. Thanks for watching. A full list of supplies and links can be found below this video on YouTube, or you can check on my blog.